So when I think about making bits of content, I think about making videos on stuff that I wish I had when I didn't know the answers to it. And especially when it comes to nutrition, it's a vast topic and there is so much good content out there for everything. Like you genuinely, if you know exactly what you need and what you want, it's so easy to find information out there. But where the gaps lie is where you don't know what you need and you don't know what you want. And I want to talk a bit about that in this video today. This isn't for any specific kind of training. It's more about hybrid training as a whole. So it doesn't matter if you're coming into this as a complete novice, a beginner, or you're someone that's been doing this for a lengthy period of time and you're just trying to brush up your knowledge and gain a bit more awareness. So we're going to go through the 5 biggest lessons I've had over 5 years of hybrid training. I'd like to say I've been doing it longer than that, but I'll be honest, when I kind of went all in this was in 2020 when the lockdown happened. I had a lot more time, a lot more energy, and I just got clear on what I wanted to do. That's when I prepped for my first ever Ironman, whilst balancing that with resistance training. So that's when I would really class as the beginning for me. So the first one we need to really know here is you need to know what phase you're in and you need to know the demands for that phase you're in. Now, when it comes from training for an aesthetic focus, you can get away with pretty crappy nutrition. Now, what I mean by this, I'm not just talking about food quality. My biggest worry is, can I get a pump? Can I be strong for the session? And does it keep you lean? So you can have a diet that's pretty much low carb, low calorie. And if you get your carbs in and around that workout, that'll get you by. And a lot of folk from the outside can be like, yeah, you look pretty good, but you're actually, yeah, I'm cutting a lot of corners here. But when it comes to performance and producing high amounts of power, getting really fit, building aerobic base and capacity, yeah, you get found out. You really, really will. And the first thing you need to know is what is the demands for the thing that you're doing? Because yeah, when you were messing about with different splits, push-pull legs, upper lower, full body, you were toying about with hitting volume body parts twice in a week. Again, you could pretty much get away with eating the same thing. You had deficit calories, maintenance calories, surplus calories, very black and white. But when it comes to this, if you've got a goal that requires increasing amount of volumes, you're going to be ramping up mileage, time in the saddle, swimming, intensity for the likes of like high rocks or some other fitness racing capacity that you're chasing, right? You need to take into account as you get fitter, as the volume increases, as the demand increases as well, you need to know what are your numbers, what are your macros, what are your hydration requirements, because that's a big one that people don't even think about. Again, a conversation we had with our last team of people that we had on our most recent training camp in Cyprus was understanding that when you train in the heat, you significantly ramp up your sweat rate and you need to be replenishing that. Then on top of that, you need to be making sure that you're taking on board more electrolytes, sodium, and you're replenishing that as well. Because the last thing you want to get is like an electrolyte imbalance where you're fatigued, you're not recovering properly. And these are things you need to know. Now, I am not expecting you to know all the exact answers to this. As long as you know rough numbers and you're taking that into account, the thing you need to remember, where energy flows, attention goes, and vice versa. Where attention goes, energy flows. And the version of you who's actually thinking about these things is going to recover better, perform better, and just get more out of themselves. So you need to understand when things are ascending or progressing or they require more demands, you need to be taking that into account with your macros and with your micros as well. And a lot of people just don't think about that because they've got away with it when they've just been aesthetic focused training, and you just can't do that anymore. You need to put more energy, more effort into it, because I'll be honest, most people are just being lazy when it comes to it because they can't be asked actually going and doing the legwork to go and find out the answers to it. So it just takes a bit of time, takes a bit of trial and error, and that's okay. The second one is you need to take into account the repercussions of reductions in volume, for example, off the back end of an event. So if you've been training for, let's say, for example, we're obviously in marathon season right now. We've got Edinburgh Marathon coming up. We've just had London. Ailey was just doing Boston Marathon there. This really is marathon season. Some of the big marathons are around this time right now, especially in the UK as well. So what you need to be thinking about is if you've built up to 60, 70, 80, 100K a week, unless you're someone that's pretty much a full-time athlete, most folk are going to be going into a bit of a deload phase, unless they've maybe got goals where they want to keep pushing towards another thing. Again, depending on their ability, their fitness levels. But for most people, they're going to be going from the height of their training to then coming down. And that's not just from like a physiological standpoint, it's also from like a psychological standpoint. Your full personalities became marathon training or high rocks or triathlon training. Like, you need a bit of time to come away from that, not only physically, but also mentally as well. They've essentially conditioned their appetite in their body and their hunger hormones and appetite hormones to basically get used to eating a higher amount of volume if they've managed it correctly. Therefore, when you come away from that, that doesn't just magically or instantly go down because the training volume's not there. So you have to be hyper conscious of that. And you have to be going into this recovery phase, just like if someone came off the back end of a diet, because this is what most folk do. People do the diet and then they just cut themselves so much slack. People do the exact same when they come off the back end of an event. But what happens is they feel a lot more out of control. And for the best part, if people have just done their first ever event prep, they've probably not been that disciplined with their nutrition and they've probably let themselves off the hook with it quite a lot, build up a lot of poor tendencies and habits when it comes to it. Therefore, when they take away that volume, it's almost like you're removing the thing that was stabilizing it and you feel very, very out of control. So all you need to be doing here is like, it's not something that you can just snap your fingers and it goes away. You just have to be drawing attention to it. You have to be super intentional with what your standard is, what you're doing, and really treat it as like the next phase rather than I'm not doing that anymore. I don't even need to think about that, because that's where so many folk get themselves into the predicament where they don't feel good in their body, they don't feel good in their composition, and they just have low energy and they just don't feel it themselves. And it's really, really not what you want. And I've been there, like I've been there many a times, right? Number three, don't treat sessions differently that are harder and easier or longer and shorter. Now, what I mean by this, and this is something that I really learned from my time of training in different climates, especially in the heat, is that the heat exposes weakness. So when I was training in Bali, there came a point where I was getting a really bad gut all the time. My tummy was really achy all the time, and I was like, what the hell is going on? And Ailey's was a lot worse than mine. And I was like, Ailey, maybe you've got colitis. Maybe, I don't know what's going on. I was pure diagnosing her with things and looking things up. What was actually happening is that we just weren't fueling shorter sessions, right? So we weren't fueling anything that was like 60 minutes. We're just like, well, because I can get away with that. And it's not, it wasn't even because you can get away with it. If I was going to anything over 60 minutes, 70 minutes, I'd be taking fuel with me every 30 minutes. I'd be taking on board carbohydrates, depending on what my day of nutrition looked like and where I was at and what my volume was like in the week. And it really made me ask myself the question, like, why am I doing this with shorter sessions, but I'm not doing it with longer sessions? And a huge unlock for me is just keeping everything the same. Now, I know this is very obvious, but think about it for a second. A lot of people do that. Now, there's probably a part of that that was still, you're eating quite a lot of food right now. If there's a moment you don't have to eat as much food, you don't have to do it. It's probably a little bit of the diet mindset still in my mind, kind of like, just because you can doesn't mean I should. And that's something I've really realized. So a big, big shift that's allowed me to recover better, push harder, perform better, is treating my shorter, less intense sessions the same as my longer sessions. Now, if it was like 30 minutes, I'm not going to be bothering my ass, right? But if it's like 40 or 60 minutes, there's a aerobic level of aerobic volume in there. I'll take a gel on like 40 minutes in. If it's a 60-minute workout, I'll take a gel on board at 30 minutes, 40 minutes in. And what this actually does long term, and a lot of folk can't get their head about it, is it makes you less reluctant to actually overeating because you don't undereat. You actually just nail your nutrition. When you say it out loud, it's very, very obvious, but a lot of people just do not do it. So treat your shorter sessions the same as your longer sessions. I used to go out and I'd be like all the gear, no idea, thinking about like my longer sessions, my fueling. But then if it was like 90 minutes or less, I'd be like, nah, don't need to do that. And it's just, it wasn't until I went to the heat that I realized that it exposed it. Now, when I say this, it's like, yeah, it was the heat that exposed it. But at the same time, it's like, well, if that's exposing it in the heat, then it means that even when it's not hot, I should be doing it anyway, even though it feels okay. So that's another big shift that you need to be going through. Number four, regulate your macros based on low, medium, and high output days. This has been a fucking game changer when it comes to managing my nutrition. This is something we actually learned from a nutritionist. Now, I was already familiar with cycling my calories. I was already aware of eat back on larger days of training. However, we started working with a nutritionist at the start of the year who actually prescribed our macros based on levels of exertion in a day. So, for example, a low day for me would be like maybe an active rest day, like I've done like 15K steps, I've not trained in that day. That's going to be a lower day. And a lot of people hear these words like high and low and they're like, oh, high, that's too much food. It's just, it's not. It's actually meeting the requirement of what you're doing. So that'd be like a lower day for me. A medium day would be like one training session and maybe 10 to 12,000 steps. And then a high day would be like a double training day and maybe like 12 to 15 plus thousand steps. But then you also need to use a bit of initiative with this as well. And this is what a lot of people don't do. And they base a lot of it on training. Steps matter, guys. And if you're doing a high aerobic output and you're trying to really push fitness, you've also got quite an active job where you're doing like a lot of steps as well. They contribute to a lot of your expenditure. And if you're not replenishing that, you can quite easily deplete yourself. So you can be classing things as like low or medium days, but they could actually be high days because you've walked 20,000 steps on what you're doing. So you're like, oh, that's a low day. I've just been a walk and I've done one workout. That's a medium or low day. And it's like, no, that's actually a high day because you've done a load of steps. So you need to really read between the lines with this and really just look at it honestly and just have a bit of personal responsibility with it and be like, right, how much activity and how much output have I had? Because it then boosts and improves your recovery and puts you in a much better spot as well. And then lastly, have 3 to 5 go-to meals that you know the macros with, that you know the food volume with, that you can almost like pull levers with. Again, this is very obvious, but like people make nutrition way harder than it needs to be. I've mentioned it already. It is a minefield. It is a very complex thing. But if you are in a training block and for the first couple of weeks, I would strongly recommend familiarizing yourself with the nutritional requirements and what that actually looks like in a plate of food for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, or a fourth or fifth meal if you have that as well. And just learn what those look like so that you know your numbers. Think about the measurements so that you can actually do this stuff mindlessly rather than eyeballing it. Because that's one thing that if I look back at the early stages of hybrid training for me, there was so many times when I was underfueling, but I was just looking at it as a meal and I wasn't actually thinking about, right, have I had enough carbs in that? Like, have I got enough micros in that for what I've done today? Like, have I got some sodium in there? Have I got some salt on it as well for how much I've sweated today? And these are the things I think about. So, like, get yourself familiarized with like 3 to 5 meals so that it's just so easy for you. So, yeah, guys, that is my 5 biggest lessons from 5 years of hybrid training. I hope you took a lot away from that. I hope you enjoyed it. And as always, leave your thoughts in the comments below and hit subscribe if you've not done it already because I'm putting a lot of effort and energy into these and I love making them, to be honest, as well. So yeah, leave your thoughts in the comments below and hit subscribe if you haven't done already, guys.